The warning lights on the bridge of the Endurance flashed red as Captain Sarah Chen watched her chief engineer's face turn pale. Dr. Martinez was not easily scared, but right now, he looked like a man who had just seen his own death. "Captain, the quantum drive is completely unstable," Martinez said, his voice shaking. "The containment field is failing and I can't stop it." Sarah gripped her command chair as the ship shook violently. Around her, the bridge crew worked frantically at their stations. Outside the view screen, space itself seemed to be tearing apart. Colors that had no names swirled in patterns that hurt to look at. "How long do we have?" Sarah asked. "Maybe 2 minutes before the drive explodes," Martinez replied. "But there's something else. The quantum field is creating some kind of hole in space. A wormhole." Sarah had been captain of the Endurance for 3 years. In that time, she had dealt with engine failures, asteroid strikes, and once even a small fire that nearly killed everyone on board. But she had never dealt with anything like this. The Endurance was just a research ship. They were supposed to be mapping empty space near the edge of human territory, not dealing with experimental physics gone wrong. "Can we shut it down?" she asked. Martinez shook his head. "It's too late. The reaction is feeding on itself now. We either go through that wormhole or we die here." Sarah looked at her crew. 200 people were counting on her to make the right decision. The wormhole was growing larger, pulling the ship toward it with invisible hands. Even if they wanted to run, their engines were not strong enough to escape. "All hands, prepare for wormhole transit," Sarah announced over the ship's communication system. "Secure all stations and brace for impact." The Endurance fell into the swirling hole in space like a stone dropped into a well. Reality twisted around them. The stars outside stretched into long lines of light. Sarah felt her stomach turn inside out as the ship was pulled through dimensions that human science barely understood. Then, suddenly, it was over. The ship stopped shaking. The warning lights went quiet. Outside the view screen, normal space had returned. Stars twinkled peacefully in the distance. "Report," Sarah ordered. "Hull is intact," called out Lieutenant Park from the engineering station. "All systems are functioning normally." "Where are we?" Sarah asked. Navigator Thompson worked at his station for several minutes before answering. "I don't know, Captain. None of these stars match our charts. We're not anywhere near human space." Sarah felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. They were lost, possibly thousands of light years from home. But before she could think about what to do next, the communications officer spoke up. "Captain, I'm picking up multiple contacts on long-range sensors." "Ships?" Sarah asked. "Yes, ma'am. Lots of them. And they're big." Sarah walked to the sensor station and looked at the display. What she saw made her blood run cold. Dozens of massive objects were moving toward them through space. Each one was larger than anything humans had ever built. The biggest one was the size of a small moon. "How long before they reach us?" she asked. "At their current speed, maybe 20 minutes, the sensor officer replied. Sarah returned to her command chair and thought quickly. The Endurance was not a warship. It had no weapons except for small point defense systems designed to shoot down asteroids. If these aliens wanted to destroy them, there was nothing they could do to stop it. But Sarah had not always been a starship captain. Before joining the Space Service, she had spent 10 years in Earth's Military Intelligence Division. She had studied alien contact protocols and psychological warfare. Most importantly, she had learned that sometimes the best weapon was not a gun but an idea planted in the enemy's mind. "Listen carefully, everyone," she said to her bridge crew. "We don't know who these aliens are, but they're coming here in overwhelming force. That suggests they're used to being feared. Most species probably surrender immediately when faced with ships that size." "Are we going to surrender?" asked Lieutenant Park. "No," Sarah said firmly. "We're going to do something they don't expect. We're going to act like we've dealt with situations like this before, like there are worse things in the galaxy than them." The crew looked confused, but Sarah had no time to explain further. The alien ships were getting closer, and she needed to prepare for contact. Communications. Start broadcasting on all standard frequencies. Tell them we're peaceful researchers who got lost. but make it sound routine like this happens all the time." "What should I say exactly?" asked the communications officer. Sarah thought for a moment. "Tell them. Unknown vessels. This is Captain Chen of the human research ship Endurance. We apologize for the intrusion into your space. We experienced a navigation error and ended up in the wrong location. We request safe passage back to our own territory to avoid any unnecessary complications." The communications officer sent the message. Within minutes, they received a reply. The translator computer worked on the alien language for several seconds before producing English words. "Human vessel, you will prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in destruction." Sarah smiled grimly. The aliens were being exactly as predictable as she had hoped. They were trying to intimidate her with threats. But she had dealt with bullies before, and she knew that the best way to handle them was to act unimpressed. "Reply to them," she told the communications officer. "Say, understood. We'll prepare to receive your boarding party. However, I should warn you that we've already sent our location back to our superiors. They're probably wondering why we haven't checked in yet." This was a complete lie. The Endurance had no way to communicate across the distances they had traveled, but the aliens didn't know that. As they waited for the aliens to arrive, Sarah called her senior officers to the bridge for an emergency meeting. She quickly explained her plan. "We're going to pretend that Earth has a massive space fleet," she told them. "We'll act like we're just scouts for a much larger and more dangerous military force. Every question they ask, we'll answer in a way that makes them think humanity is connected to something they don't want to mess with." Dr. Martinez looked skeptical. "Captain, what if they call our bluff?" "Then we'll deal with that when it happens," Sarah replied. "But right now, this is our best chance of survival. These aliens are clearly used to being the biggest threat in the galaxy. If we can make them think there's something bigger and scarier than them, they might decide we're not worth the trouble." The largest alien ship moved closer to the Endurance. Sarah could see it clearly now through the view screen. It was shaped like a massive blade, covered in weapon systems that could turn her small ship into dust in seconds. Smaller ships surrounded it like a swarm of angry insects. "Captain," called the sensor officer, "they're launching some kind of boarding craft." Sarah nodded. "Everyone remember the plan. We're calm, cooperative researchers who are used to dealing with galactic politics. We'll answer their questions honestly, but we'll make it clear that we're just the advanced scouts for something much more powerful." The boarding craft attached itself to the Endurance's docking bay with a metallic clang that echoed through the ship. Sarah could hear the outer airlock opening. Heavy footsteps moved through the corridors toward the bridge. "Here they come," whispered Lieutenant Park. The bridge doors opened with a hiss. 3 tall figures in dark armor stepped inside. They were humanoid in shape, but clearly alien. Their faces were hidden behind helmets that glowed with a pale blue light. Energy weapons hung from their belts. The leader stepped forward and spoke in accented but clear English. "I am Commander Zeth of the Zapirian Imperial Fleet. You will identify yourself and explain your presence in Imperial space." Sarah stood up slowly and calmly, as if she met alien military commanders every day. "I'm Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Survey Service. We're conducting a routine deep space mapping mission. Our navigation systems malfunctioned and we ended up here by accident." Commander Zeth's helmet turned slightly as he studied the bridge. "Your technology appears primitive. How did you travel such distances?" Sarah shrugged. "Our ship isn't anything special. We're just using standard survey equipment. The real exploration fleets have much better ships, but they save those for important missions." This seemed to catch the aliens' attention. "Other fleets?" "Of course," Sarah said casually. "The survey service is just one small part of Earth's space operations. We handle routine mapping and first contact situations. When we find something interesting, we report back and the specialists take over." Commander Zeth was quiet for several long seconds. Sarah could almost see the wheels turning in his mind. He was trying to figure out if she was telling the truth. "What specialists?" he asked finally. Sarah pretended to think about it. "Well, that depends on what we find. If it's a new trade route, the commercial fleet handles it. If it's a potential threat, the Defense Corps gets involved. If it's really serious. She paused and shook her head. Let's just say there are people back home who specialize in problems that can't be solved with diplomacy. The alien commander's helmet turned toward his companions. They spoke quietly in their own language for a moment before he turned back to Sarah. You seem remarkably calm for someone whose ship is surrounded and outgunned, he observed. Sarah nodded. Commander, no offense, but this isn't our first time dealing with territorial disputes. The galaxy is full of civilizations that shoot first and ask questions later. We've learned to stay calm and try to work things out peacefully. It usually works out better for everyone involved. Commander Zeth tilted his helmet. You speak as if you have experience with such situations. We do, Sarah replied simply. The survey service encounters new civilizations all the time. Most of them are reasonable once they understand we're not a threat. Some of them, she shrugged again. Well, those situations get handed over to people who are paid to deal with unreasonable civilizations. The alien leader stood very still for a long moment. Sarah could feel the tension in the air as her crew waited to see what would happen next. Everything depended on whether the aliens believed her story or decided to call her bluff. Finally, Commander Zeth spoke. You will accompany us to our command ship for further questioning. Sarah nodded as if she had expected this. Of course. Should I bring my senior officers? That will not be necessary. You alone will come. Sarah turned to her first officer. Lieutenant Park, you have the bridge. If I'm not back in 12 hours, follow Standard Protocol 7. Lieutenant Park nodded seriously, even though he had no idea what Protocol 7 was supposed to be. Understood, Captain. As Sarah followed Commander Zeth off the bridge, she hoped her bluff would hold long enough for her to figure out what to do next. The aliens clearly had the power to destroy her ship, but they also seemed curious about the mysterious human civilization she was describing. All she had to do now was convince them that humanity was connected to something too dangerous to mess with. How hard could that be? The inside of the Zapirian command ship was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. The corridors were massive, built for beings much larger than humans. Strange symbols glowed along the walls, and the air hummed with energy from unknown machines. Commander Zeth led her through a maze of passages while alien crew members stopped their work to stare at the human visitor. Sarah tried to look calm and curious rather than frightened. She made mental notes about everything she saw. The aliens were clearly advanced, but their technology seemed focused on war. Every surface was armored. Every room she glimpsed was filled with weapons or tactical displays. Impressive ship, she commented to Commander Zeth as they walked. How many crew does it carry? 50,000, he replied without turning around. The Dominion's Wrath is the flagship of the Imperial fleet. Sarah nodded as if she found this information routine. About what we expected for a ship this size. Our intelligence reports suggested Zapirian vessels were built for large crews. This made Commander Zeth stop walking. He turned to face her, his glowing helmet tilting slightly. Your intelligence reports? Sarah realized she had made a mistake. She was supposed to be a lost surveyor, not a spy. But she recovered quickly. The Survey Service shares information with all Earth departments. When we encounter new civilizations, we forward everything we learn to the appropriate agencies. It helps prevent misunderstandings later. You had reports about us before you arrived here? Not about you specifically, Sarah said carefully, but we had some information about this general region of space. Long-range sensors, deep space monitoring stations, that sort of thing. We know there's a major civilization somewhere in this area, but the details are sketchy. Commander Zeth resumed walking, but Sarah could tell he was thinking about what she had said. They passed through several more corridors before arriving at a large chamber that was clearly designed for interrogations. The walls were lined with alien technology she couldn't identify. A single chair sat in the center of the room under bright lights. Sit, Commander Zeth ordered, pointing to the chair. Sarah sat down calmly, as if she had done this many times before. Two other Zapirians entered the room and took positions near the walls. One of them carried a device that looked like some kind of scanner. You will answer our questions truthfully, Commander Zeth said. Any attempt to deceive us will be detected and punished. Sarah nodded. Of course, Commander. I have no reason to lie. Like I said, we're peaceful researchers. We want to resolve this situation and get back to our mission. The Zapirian with the scanner spoke up. What is the current military strength of your species? This was the moment Sarah had been dreading. She had to give an answer that sounded believable without claiming humanity was too powerful to defeat. The key was to make herself sound unimportant while hinting at larger forces. I honestly don't know the exact numbers, she said. The service doesn't get briefed on military details. That's not our job. We're scientists and explorers, not soldiers. Estimate, the scanner operator demanded. Sarah pretended to think about it. Well, there are the system defense fleets around the major colonies, maybe a few hundred ships total. Then there's the deep-range fleet for exploration and patrol duties. I think they have maybe 50 or 60 ships, but those are designed for long-term missions, not combat. The Zapirians exchanged glances. These numbers made humanity sound relatively weak, which seemed to puzzle them. What about your main battle fleet? Commander Zeth asked. Sarah looked confused. Which one? The Home Defense Fleet? The Expeditionary Force? The Special Operations Command? You have multiple battle fleets? Commander, I'm really not the right person to ask about military organization. I know there are several different commands because they sometimes requisition our ships for transport duties, but I don't know the details of their size or capabilities. This was technically true. Sarah was making up most of the fleet names, but she was careful to sound uncertain rather than knowledgeable. The best lies contained elements of truth. The scanner operator studied his device and spoke to Commander Zeth in their alien language. Sarah couldn't understand the words, but she could guess they were discussing whether she was telling the truth. Commander Zeth turned back to her. You claim to be researchers, yet you carry detailed star charts of this region. Explain. Sarah had expected this question. Long-range survey is our primary mission. We map jump routes, catalog star systems, and identify potential hazards or opportunities. The charts we carry cover a huge area because we never know where our missions might take us. Show us these charts. Sarah activated her personal data, hadn't displayed the star maps her ship carried. The Zapirians studied them intently. The charts showed detailed information about hundreds of star systems, including many the aliens hadn't known were inhabited. How did you obtain this information? The scanner operator asked. Standard survey work, Sarah replied. Some of it comes from our own missions, some from other survey service teams, and some from the Deep Space Monitoring Network. What monitoring network? Sarah had to be careful here. She was walking a fine line between making humanity sound advanced and making them sound like a threat. We maintain automated sensor platforms throughout our area of space. They watch for things like asteroid impacts, solar flares, unusual energy signatures, that sort of thing. Sometimes they pick up signs of civilization in distant systems. Commander, Zeth studied the charts more closely. These show inhabited systems that are not part of the Empire. Yes, the galaxy is a big place. There are lots of civilizations out there. We have conquered or destroyed all civilizations in this sector. Sarah looked surprised. All of them? That seems inefficient. Inefficient? Well, yes. Conquest is expensive and time-consuming. Most civilizations are willing to negotiate trade agreements or non-interference pacts if you approach them diplomatically. You only need to use force against the ones that refuse to be reasonable. The Zapirians were clearly taken aback by this attitude. They had built their empire on fear and conquest, and here was a human calmly suggesting there might be better ways to handle galactic politics. Your species negotiates with potential enemies? Commander Zeth asked. Commander, we prefer not to have enemies at all. It's much easier to trade with your neighbors than to fight them. Of course, some species are too aggressive or unreasonable to deal with peacefully. Sarah paused and looked directly at him. That's when we call in the specialists I mentioned earlier. Tell us about these specialists. Sarah sighed as if she was reluctant to discuss an unpleasant topic. Look, Commander, Most of the galaxy's civilizations are reasonable people who just want to live their lives in peace. But occasionally, we encounter species that only understand force. When that happens, the survey service steps aside and lets the Defense Corps handle the situation. What does the Defense Corps do? Whatever is necessary to protect human space and our allies. Sarah's voice became colder. They don't negotiate, they don't take prisoners, and they don't stop until the threat is eliminated completely. The room became very quiet. Sarah could see the Zapirians looking at each other with what she hoped was concern. "You threaten us?" Commander Zeth asked slowly. "Not at all," Sarah replied quickly. "I'm just explaining how our system works. The survey service handles first contact and diplomacy. If that fails, other agencies take over. But you seem like reasonable people. I'm sure we can work out some kind of understanding." The scanner operator spoke up. "What allies do you refer to?" Sarah had to be very careful with this answer. She needed to make humanity sound connected to other civilizations without making specific claims that could be easily checked. "Over the years, we've established friendly relationships with several species in our area of space. Some of them have defense treaties with Earth. Others just have agreements to share information about mutual threats." "Name these allies." Sarah shook her head. "I'm not authorized to discuss specific treaty details. That's way above my security clearance. I'm just a survey ship captain." This was actually smart. By refusing to give details, she made it sound like the information was too sensitive to share, which suggested it was important. Commander Zeth began pacing around the chair. "Your ship appears to be alone. Where are these allies you speak of?" "Commander, the Endurance is a long-range survey vessel. We're designed to operate independently for months at a time. That's why we carry such extensive star charts and communication equipment. We stay in regular contact with Base Command, but we don't travel with escort ships unless we're entering a known danger zone." "Is this a known danger zone?" Sarah pretended to consider the question. "Well, our intelligence suggested there might be an aggressive civilization in this general area, but we didn't expect to encounter them directly. This was supposed to be a routine mapping mission along the outer edges of explored space. Your intelligence was correct about our nature. Yes, but you're also being reasonable about this situation. A truly aggressive species would have just blown up our ship without talking to us first. The fact that you're willing to communicate suggests you're the kind of civilization we can work with." Commander Zeth stopped pacing. "You believe we can negotiate an agreement?" "I don't see why not. You have an empire to run, and we have our research to conduct. As long as we stay out of each other's way, there's no reason for conflict." The scanner operator said something in the alien language. Commander Zeth listened and then turned back to Sarah. "Our sensors show your ship has been transmitting signals since you arrived." Sarah's heart jumped, but she kept her expression calm. "Of course, we always maintain regular contact with Base Command during missions. It's standard safety protocol." "What have you told them?" "Just our current status and location. When survey teams encounter new civilizations, we're required to report it immediately. That way, if something goes wrong, the appropriate people back home know what happened and who was responsible." This was exactly the right thing to say. Sarah could see the Zapirians becoming more concerned. The idea that their actions were being monitored and reported back to unknown human authorities clearly made them uncomfortable. "Who receives these reports?" Commander Zeth asked. "Survey Command, obviously, but they forward copies to Intelligence, Defense, and the Diplomatic Corps, probably others too. I don't really know how all that works above my level." Commander Zeth walked over to confer with his companions in their own language. Sarah couldn't understand what they were saying, but their body language suggested they were arguing about something. After several minutes, Commander Zeth returned to her. "We will escort your ship to the edge of Imperial space. You will leave immediately and not return." Sarah nodded gratefully. "That sounds fair, Commander. I'll make sure to note, in my report, that the Zapirian Empire was professional and reasonable in handling this situation. I'm sure that will influence how our superiors view any future contact." "Future contact? Well, now that we know you're here, someone from the Diplomatic Corps will probably want to establish formal relations eventually. You know, trade agreements, territorial boundaries, communication protocols, that sort of thing. But that's way above my level. I just write the initial contact report. Sarah could see that Commander Zeth was thinking hard about the implications of what she was saying. From his perspective, humanity had just announced that they knew about the Zapirian Empire, had been monitoring them from a distance, and were now planning to establish official diplomatic contact. The question that had to be bothering him was simple. If humans were just peaceful researchers, why did they need such an extensive intelligence network? And if they were powerful enough to monitor the Empire from across the galaxy, why were they being so polite about this encounter? Sarah stood up from the chair. Commander, I hope this misunderstanding won't interfere with future relations between our species. The Survey Service has encountered hundreds of civilizations over the years, and we've found that first impressions tend to shape long-term relationships. What do you mean? Sarah smiled. Species that treat our survey teams well usually find that Earth is very interested in establishing peaceful, profitable relationships. Species that don't, she shrugged. Well, let's just say their interactions with humanity tend to be handled by different departments. As Commander Zeth escorted her back to the Endurance, Sarah could tell that her words had given the aliens a lot to think about. She had successfully planted the idea that humanity was part of something larger and more dangerous than it appeared. Now she just had to hope that the bluff would hold long enough for her to figure out what to do next. Admiral Kethvar stood in his private chambers aboard the Dominion's Wrath, staring at the report Commander Zeth had delivered an hour ago. The human captain's words echoed in his mind like warnings from a disturbing dream. In 3 centuries of military service, he had conquered 47 star systems and destroyed dozens of civilizations. But he had never encountered anything like this. The humans claimed to be simple researchers, yet they carried star charts that revealed the locations of civilizations the Empire had never discovered. They spoke of galactic politics as if they were familiar with threats that made the mighty Zapirian Empire look like a minor concern. Most disturbing of all, they seemed genuinely worried about what would happen if their peaceful mission turned violent. Kethvar activated his communication console and contacted his chief intelligence officer. Report to my chambers immediately, he ordered. Within minutes, Colonel Vexitar arrived. The intelligence officer was one of the few beings in the Empire that Kethvar trusted completely. Vexitar had served under him for over 50 years, and had never failed to provide accurate information about enemy capabilities. What have you learned about the humans? Kethvar asked without preamble. Vexitar consulted his datapad. Very little, Admiral. Their ship's database is heavily encrypted, but what we could access suggests they come from a single world called Earth, located approximately 12,000 light-years from here. A single world? Kethvar frowned. That seems unlikely given their apparent knowledge of this region. That's what puzzles me as well, Admiral. Their technology is primitive compared to ours, yet they claim to have monitoring stations throughout this sector. Either they're lying about their capabilities or they have allies we don't know about, Kethvar finished. Vexitar nodded grimly. There's something else, Admiral. We analyzed the communication signals their ship has been transmitting. The power required to broadcast across galactic distances is beyond anything in our own technology. Kethvar felt a chill run down his spine. The Zapirian Empire possessed the most advanced communication systems in known space. If the humans had technology that surpassed Imperial capabilities, what else might they have? Have you been able to decode their messages? Partially. They appear to be status reports to something called Survey Command. The humans have been providing detailed information about our fleet positions and capabilities. This was exactly what Kethvar had feared. Not only were the humans monitoring the Empire's activities, but they were reporting everything back to their superiors in real time. What about their claims regarding other civilizations? He asked. Vexitar's expression became troubled. That's the most disturbing part, Admiral. The human captain referenced several species and conflicts that don't appear in any of our historical records. She spoke of something called the Hegemony Wars, and mentioned civilizations that were destroyed for being too aggressive. Destroyed? By whom? Unknown. But Admiral, I had our analysts review our expansion records for the past 2 centuries. There are several star systems that should have been inhabited based on our long-range surveys, but when our fleets arrived, they were empty. We always assumed the civilizations had destroyed themselves or died out naturally. Kethvar stared out the viewport at the stars beyond. You think they were eliminated by these mysterious human allies? It's possible, Admiral. The human captain seemed to know about our empire's expansion patterns. She warned us about expanding too aggressively into the wrong neighborhoods. The Admiral turned back to his intelligence chief. What does that suggest to you? That either the humans are the best liars in galactic history, or there really is some kind of power out there that we haven't encountered yet, a power that considers the Zapirian Empire to be just another regional threat to be managed. Kethvar walked to his desk and activated a holographic display showing the known galaxy. Red markers indicated systems under Imperial control. It was an impressive sight, thousands of worlds united under Zapirian rule. But as he looked at it now, he couldn't help but notice how small it seemed compared to the vast unknown regions beyond. Show me the human ship's trajectory, he ordered. Vextar input commands into the display. A blue line appeared, showing the path the Endurance had taken through space. It originated from a region of the galaxy that Imperial long-range sensors had never penetrated. According to their navigation data, they traveled through at least 6 different sectors to reach this position, Vextar reported, all areas we've never explored. Why haven't we explored them? Vextar hesitated before answering. Because our expansion in those directions was discouraged. Explain. Over the past century, several Imperial fleets sent to explore those regions simply disappeared. No distress signals, no wreckage found. We assumed they encountered natural hazards or were destroyed by primitive civilizations with lucky shots. But now you think they encountered whatever force is backing the humans, Kethvar concluded. The 2 officers stood in silence for several minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Kethvar spoke. What is your assessment of the human captain's truthfulness? She was being evasive about some details, but our best scanners detected no outright deception. More importantly, her emotional responses were consistent with someone who was genuinely concerned about preventing a larger conflict, not someone who was bluffing about non-existent allies. Kethvar nodded slowly. This was what worried him most. The human captain had not acted like someone trying to deceive a superior force. She had acted like someone who was genuinely trying to prevent a misunderstanding that could lead to catastrophic consequences for both sides. Admiral, Vexitar said carefully, there's one more thing. The human mentioned that their species has established defense treaties with other civilizations. If that's true, attacking them could trigger a much larger conflict. Do we have any evidence of these alleged allies? Not direct evidence, no. But as I mentioned, there are several unexplained disappearances of Imperial fleets in regions the humans seem familiar with. It's possible those fleets encountered hostile forces allied with Earth. Kethvar returned to the viewport and gazed out at the stars. For 3 centuries, the Zapirian Empire had been the undisputed master of this region of space. They had grown accustomed to being feared and obeyed by every species they encountered. The idea that there might be civilizations out there that viewed the Empire as just another minor power was deeply unsettling. What do you recommend? He asked. We need more information, Admiral. I suggest we allow the humans to leave as planned, but assign long-range reconnaissance ships to follow them at a distance. If their claims about having powerful allies are true, we need to know what we're dealing with. And if their claims are false, then we'll have learned that humans are exceptionally skilled at psychological warfare. Either way, we'll be better, prepared for future encounters. Kethvar considered this carefully. The safe course of action would be to destroy the human ship and forget this encounter ever happened. But if the humans really were connected to some unknown galactic power, such an action could bring disaster down upon the Empire. On the other hand, if he let them go and they were lying, he would look weak to his own officers and to the Imperial High Command. The Zapirian Empire had been built on a reputation for ruthless strength. Any sign of hesitation or fear could encourage rebellions among conquered worlds. Sir, Vextar said quietly. There's something else you should know. I had my staff analyze the human ship's design and construction materials. The metallurgy is primitive, but the engineering is remarkably efficient. More importantly, the ship shows signs of having been built quickly and in large numbers. What does that tell us? That despite their claims of being peaceful researchers, the humans have the industrial capacity to build large fleets when necessary. The Endurance may be primitive compared to our ships, but it's built like a military vessel disguised as a civilian craft. This revelation sent another chill through Kethvar's mind. If the humans were building ships that looked like research vessels but were actually designed for combat, it suggested they were preparing for war while maintaining the appearance of peaceful exploration. How many ships like this could they have built? Based on the construction methods we observed, potentially thousands, Admiral. And if their technology is advancing as rapidly as their efficiency suggests, their newer ships might be significantly more dangerous than the Endurance. Kethvar made his decision. We will escort the humans to the edge of Imperial space as promised, but I want continuous long-range surveillance of the route they take home. If they really are just peaceful researchers, they'll head directly back to their own territory. If they're scouts for an invasion force, they'll make contact with other ships or hidden bases. Understood, Admiral. What about their requests for future diplomatic contact? We'll prepare for it, but carefully. I want full intelligence reports on every system between here and their claimed homeworld. If there really are powerful civilizations allied with Earth, we need to know about them before any diplomats arrive. Vextar nodded and prepared to leave, but Kethvar stopped him with one final question. In your professional opinion, Colonel, are the humans a threat to the Empire? Vextar thought carefully before answering. Not directly, Admiral. Their ship could be destroyed by a single Imperial cruiser. But if they're telling the truth about their connections to other powers, he paused. Then they may represent the most dangerous threat we've ever encountered. Not because of what they can do to us, but because of what might respond if we harm them. After Vextar left, Admiral Kethvar remained alone in his chambers, staring out at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the edges of Imperial space, unknown civilizations might be watching and waiting. The humans had spoken of their empire as if it were just one of many powers in the galaxy, not the dominant force it had always believed itself to be. For the first time in his long military career, Kethvar found himself wondering if the Zapirian Empire was truly as powerful as it claimed to be, or if it had simply been lucky enough to avoid encountering anything stronger. The thought kept him awake long into the ship's night cycle. As he finally prepared for rest, one final detail from the human captain's words echoed in his mind. The galaxy's bigger than you think, and not everyone is as reasonable as you've been. What had she meant by that? And more importantly, who were these unreasonable beings she had referenced so casually? Kethvar had a feeling he would find out sooner than he wanted to. 3 days had passed since the initial encounter, and Admiral Kethvar found himself growing more paranoid with each passing hour. The human ship Endurance remained docked to his flagship, while his intelligence teams worked frantically to verify Captain Chen's claims. What they had discovered so far only deepened his concerns. The humans had been completely cooperative, answering every question with the calm patience of people who had nothing to hide. Yet their answers painted a picture of galactic politics that was utterly alien to everything the Zapirian Empire understood about the universe. Kethvar stood in his war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing star charts, fleet positions, and intelligence reports. His senior staff had gathered for what he hoped would be the final briefing before deciding the humans' fate. Report, he ordered Colonel Vextar. Admiral, we have verified several of the humans' claims, the intelligence officer began. Their star charts are accurate. More accurate than our own, in fact. They contain detailed information about systems we've never explored, including defensive positions and technological assessments of civilizations we didn't know existed. How could they have obtained such information? That's what concerns me, sir. Either they have exploration capabilities far beyond what their primitive ship suggests, or they're receiving intelligence from sources we can't identify. General Mordok, the Empire's chief military strategist, stepped forward. Admiral, I've been analyzing their ship's construction and equipment. While their technology is primitive, their design philosophy is disturbing. Explain. The Endurance appears to be built for long-term survival in hostile environments. Its hull can withstand massive damage. Its life support systems are over-engineered. Its communication array has more power than most of our battleships. This is not a research vessel, Admiral. This is a ship designed to operate alone in dangerous territory for extended periods. Kethvar studied the technical readouts on his display. You believe it's a military scout? I believe it's designed to gather intelligence on potential enemies while maintaining the appearance of peaceful research. More importantly, I believe there are many more ships like it. What evidence do you have for that claim? General Mordak activated a new display showing industrial analysis data. We analyzed the construction materials and manufacturing techniques used to build their ship. The precision of the work, the standardization of components, the efficiency of assembly, all suggest mass production on an enormous scale. Colonel Vexistar added his own findings. We also discovered something interesting about their crew, Admiral. Every single human aboard that ship has military training. Oh, they're scientists and researchers as well, but they all have combat experience. All of them? Everyone. The cook was a demolitions expert. The engineer was formerly a warship designer. Even their youngest crew member spent 2 years in something called hostile environment operations. These are not civilians, Admiral. They're soldiers pretending to be scientists. Kethvar felt his worst fears being confirmed. The humans were clearly conducting military reconnaissance while hiding behind a facade of peaceful exploration. But if that were true, why were they being so open about their activities? Why volunteer information about their intelligence networks and military capabilities? What about their claims regarding other civilizations, he asked. Vextar's expression became grim. That's the most troubling part of our investigation, Admiral. We sent long-range probes to some of the systems marked on their charts. 3 of those systems should have contained inhabited worlds based on our previous surveys. All 3 were empty, completely sterilized. Recently, within the past 50 years. And Admiral, the method of sterilization was unlike anything we've ever seen. No radiation, no chemical contamination, no evidence of bombardment. The worlds were simply cleaned. All life removed down to the cellular level, but the planets themselves left intact. The war room fell silent as the implications sank in. Someone or something was systematically eliminating civilizations with technology far beyond imperial capabilities, and the humans seemed to know about it. General Mordak spoke up. Admiral, I recommend we reconsider our approach to this situation. If the humans are connected to whatever force is responsible for those sterilizations. You think we should release them? Kethvar said. I think we should be very careful about how we proceed. The human captain has been patient with our questioning, but she's also made it clear that her people expect her to return safely. If we harm her, we may trigger the very conflict she's been trying to prevent. Colonel Vexistar nodded in agreement. The humans have been sending regular status reports back to their superiors throughout this encounter. Those reports have been growing increasingly concerned about the length of our interrogation. The latest message specifically mentioned that protocols might need to be escalated if the situation continues. What protocols? Unknown. But the tone of the message suggests they're not diplomatic in nature. Kethvar walked to the center of the room and studied the holographic galaxy display. Red markers showed Imperial territory, an impressive collection of conquered worlds spanning hundreds of light years. But now he was seeing it with new eyes. Beyond the edges of that red zone lay vast regions of space that the Empire had never explored, filled with unknown civilizations and mysterious threats. Summon Captain Chen, he ordered. I want to speak with her directly. 20 minutes later, Sarah Chen was escorted into the war room by 2 Imperial guards. She looked around at the assembled officers and technological displays with the same calm curiosity she had shown throughout her captivity. Captain Chen, Kethvar said formally, we have been analyzing your claims and the information you've provided. I have some additional questions. Of course, Admiral. I'm happy to help however I can. Kethvar gestured to the holographic display. Your star charts show several systems that our surveys indicate should be inhabited, but which our recent reconnaissance has found to be empty. Explain this. Sarah studied the display for a moment before answering. Which system specifically are you asking about? HFY highlighted 3 star systems on the map. Sarah's expression became more serious as she recognized them. Oh, those systems. She was quiet for several seconds before continuing. Admiral, I really hope this won't affect our negotiations. Those situations were resolved before my time, and they're not something the survey service likes to discuss. What situations? Sarah seemed reluctant to answer. Look, Admiral, what I told you before about different agencies handling different types of problems. Those 3 systems were examples of what happens when diplomacy fails completely. They were destroyed? They were. Cleaned up. But please understand, those civilizations brought it on themselves. They were given multiple opportunities to negotiate peaceful solutions to their territorial disputes. They chose aggression instead. General Mordak leaned forward. What kind of aggression? They started attacking survey service ships, not just capturing them or forcing them to leave, actually destroying them and killing the crews. That crossed a line that Earth doesn't allow anyone to cross, no matter how isolated they might think they are. Colonel Vexistar spoke up. So Earth destroyed 3 entire civilizations in retaliation for attacking your research ships? Sarah shook her head. Earth didn't destroy them. Earth reported the problem to the appropriate authorities and let them handle it. We don't have the capability or the desire to sterilize entire worlds. But there are older civilizations in the galaxy that take a very dim view of species that attack peaceful researchers. Older civilizations. Admiral, humanity is relatively new to galactic politics. We've only had interstellar travel for about 2 centuries, but the galaxy is ancient, and some of the powers that have been here since the beginning have very strong opinions about how newcomers should behave. When someone starts killing scientists and explorers, those older powers tend to take notice. HFY felt his blood run cold. Are you saying there are civilizations more powerful than yours watching our actions? Admiral, I'm saying there are civilizations out there that make both of our species look like children playing with toys. They don't usually get involved in local politics, but they do have certain standards. And one of those standards is that peaceful research must be protected. The war room was completely silent. Sarah looked around at the assembled officers with genuine sympathy. Look, I understand this is a lot to absorb. But please believe me when I say that the best thing for everyone involved is to resolve this situation peacefully. The Zapirian Empire is impressive, but it's not the biggest fish in this galactic pond. Not even close. General Mordak asked the question they were all thinking. If these older civilizations are so powerful, why haven't we encountered them before? Because you've been reasonable, Sarah replied simply. You conquer and expand, but you don't go around destroying peaceful research missions or genociding entire species just for fun. The powers I'm talking about don't care about normal imperial politics. They only intervene when someone crosses certain lines. What lines? Sarah's expression became deadly serious. Attacking peaceful researchers is one. Attempting to destroy all life in a star system is another. And the biggest one, threatening civilizations that are under their protection. Admiral HFY asked the critical question. Are humans under their protection? Sarah nodded slowly. Earth signed the Galactic Research Protocols about 50 years ago. It was mostly a formality. We agreed not to weaponize certain technologies or attack other species' research missions, and in return, we were granted protection from civilizations that might try to prevent our scientific work. Who granted this protection? I don't have the security clearance to know all the details, Admiral. I just know that attacking survey service ships is considered a violation of galactic law by some very old and very powerful civilizations, the kind that can sterilize entire worlds without leaving a trace. HFY looked at his officers and saw his own fear reflected in their faces. If the humans were telling the truth, then holding them prisoner could be interpreted as an act of aggression against forces that the Empire couldn't possibly defeat. But there was still one possibility that hadn't been explored. Captain Chen, he said slowly, What if I decided that your claims were elaborate lies designed to protect a weak civilization that has stumbled into Imperial space? Sarah's face went pale. Admiral, please don't test that theory. Why not? Because if you're wrong, the consequences won't just fall on you. They'll fall on your entire civilization. The powers I'm talking about don't make distinctions between governments and civilians when they decide a species has become too dangerous to tolerate. Kethvar studied her face carefully. She wasn't trying to sound threatening or defiant. She was genuinely terrified about what might happen if he made the wrong decision. You seem very concerned about the welfare of my people, he observed. Admiral, I've spent 3 years exploring space and meeting new civilizations. Every species I've encountered has had something unique and valuable to contribute to galactic civilization. The Zapirian Empire has built something impressive here. I would hate to see it destroyed because of a misunderstanding. For the first time since this encounter began, Admiral Kethvar believed he was seeing the real Sarah Chen. Not the calm diplomat or the evasive intelligence operative, but a person who genuinely cared about preventing a catastrophic conflict. The question was whether he could afford to believe her warnings, or whether he was being manipulated by the most sophisticated psychological warfare operation in galactic history. He had to make a decision that could determine the fate of his entire civilization. 6 months after the Endurance had departed Zapirian space, Admiral Kethvar sat in his private study aboard the Dominion's Wrath, reading a report that changed everything he thought he knew about the encounter with Captain Chen. The investigation had taken months of careful work by his best intelligence operatives. They had followed the humans' trail back through space, analyzed every piece of data from the encounter, and finally uncovered the truth about Earth's mysterious galactic connections. There were no ancient protector civilizations. There was no vast human military fleet. There were no defense treaties with powerful alien species. The entire story had been an elaborate bluff, executed with such skill that it had fooled the most sophisticated intelligence apparatus in the known galaxy. Colonel Vextar stood at attention before Kethvar's desk, waiting for his superior's reaction to the devastating report. The intelligence officer had spent 4 months tracking down the truth, following leads across dozens of star systems, and the evidence was undeniable. Explain how we were deceived, Kethvar said quietly. Vextar activated a holographic display, showing the route the Endurance had taken back to human space. We followed them at maximum sensor range as ordered. They traveled directly to a single star system containing one inhabited world, Earth. No stops, no contact with other ships, no evidence of the vast civilization they described. What about their instantaneous communications? A carefully orchestrated deception, Admiral. We now know that human ships launched automated probes through the same unstable wormhole that brought the Endurance to our space. These probes were pre-programmed to broadcast pre-recorded messages at specific times, creating the illusion of real-time communication across impossible distances. Kethvar felt a mixture of admiration and anger. And their extensive star charts? Generated by long-range automated surveys conducted over many decades. The humans have been launching unmanned probes to map distant regions of the galaxy for over a century. They know more about galactic geography than we do, but they learned it through patience and careful exploration, not through contact with other civilizations. The sterilized worlds they knew about? Natural disasters, Admiral. We confirmed that 2 of the 3 systems were destroyed by supernovae that occurred before the humans even achieved interstellar travel. The 3rd was apparently sterilized by a plague that evolved on the world itself. The humans simply discovered the empty systems during their mapping surveys and filed the information away. Kethvar stood and walked to the viewport, staring out at the stars. So they had no ancient protectors, no powerful military, no galactic allies of any kind. None, Admiral. Earth's entire space-capable military consists of exactly 12 patrol ships designed for system defense and asteroid mining protection. The Endurance was one of only 6 long-range vessels in their entire fleet. And yet they convinced us that attacking them would bring down the wrath of galactic powers we couldn't defeat. Vextar nodded. It was the most sophisticated psychological, warfare operation we've ever encountered, Admiral. They studied our behavior patterns, identified our assumptions about galactic politics, and crafted a deception perfectly designed to exploit our fears. Kethavar turned back to his intelligence chief. How did they know so much about Imperial expansion patterns and military doctrine? They've been watching us for decades, Admiral. Those automated survey probes I mentioned? Many of them were stationed along our borders, monitoring our fleet movements and territorial expansion. They knew exactly how the Empire responds to potential threats because they'd been studying us since before we knew they existed. For what purpose? Vextar consulted his datapad. According to intercepted human communications, their government has a department called Galactic Affairs that monitors all major civilizations in this region of space. Their primary mission is not conquest or intelligence gathering for military purposes, it's survival. Explain. The humans are acutely aware that they're one of the weakest spacefaring civilizations in the galaxy, Admiral. Their entire strategy is based on avoiding conflict with more powerful species like us. They use deception and misdirection to convince potential enemies that attacking Earth would be more trouble than it's worth. Kethavar sat back down and studied the evidence files. Inside, he found detailed psychological profiles of Imperial commanders, analysis of Zapirian military tactics, and even recordings of previous first contact scenarios between the Empire and other species. The humans had been preparing for an encounter like this for decades. How many other civilizations have they deceived? He asked. According to our investigation, at least 17 major powers have encountered human survey teams and been convinced to avoid human space due to warnings about mysterious galactic protectors or dangerous military allies. In every case, the humans tailored their deception to exploit that specific civilization's fears and assumptions. And it worked every time? So far, yes. The humans have been conducting this deception campaign for over 80 years without being discovered. Until now. Kethavar leaned back in his chair and considered the implications. The humans had identified the Zapirian Empire as a potential threat and had developed a specific strategy to neutralize that threat without firing a single shot. They had studied Imperial psychology so thoroughly that they knew exactly what lies would be most believable to Zapirian minds. What is your assessment of the human threat level? He asked. Vextar paused before answering. Militarily, they pose no threat whatsoever, Admiral. A single Imperial battle group could conquer their entire civilization in a matter of days. But strategically, he hesitated. Speak freely, Colonel. Strategically, they may be the most dangerous civilization we've ever encountered. Not because of their weapons or their technology, but because of their ability to manipulate galactic politics. They've convinced 17 major powers to leave them alone through nothing but carefully crafted lies and psychological manipulation. Kethavar nodded slowly. They've weaponized fear itself. Yes, Admiral. And they're very good at it. The Admiral stood and walked to his wall display showing the current boundaries of Imperial space. For the first time in months, he really looked at the gaps between conquered territories, regions where Imperial expansion had been mysteriously redirected or abandoned due to reports of dangerous civilizations or unstable stellar phenomena. Colonel, I want you to review all of our expansion plans for the past century. Look for any instances where we changed course due to intelligence about powerful civilizations or dangerous regions of space. You think the humans have been manipulating our expansion patterns? I think they've been manipulating everyone's expansion patterns, creating safe zones around their territory by convincing all their potential enemies that certain regions of space are too dangerous to explore. Vextar made notes on his datapad. If that's true, Admiral, then their deception campaign is far more sophisticated than we initially realized. They haven't just been protecting themselves, they've been conducting strategic manipulation of galactic politics on a massive scale. Kethavar returned to his desk and activated his personal communication console. I need to speak with the High Command immediately. Admiral, what are your intentions regarding the humans? Kethavar paused with his hand over the communication. Controls. It was a good question. The humans had made fools of the Imperial Intelligence Service and had been manipulating the Empire's strategic decisions for decades. By all rights, they deserved to be crushed for their deception, but there was another way to look at the situation. "Tell me, Colonel," he said slowly, "in your professional opinion, what would happen if we attempted to conquer Earth?" Vextar thought carefully before answering. "Militarily, we would succeed easily, but politically it could be disastrous." "How so?" "The humans have spent decades building relationships with other civilizations throughout this region of space. Not military alliances, but information networks. They know things about galactic politics that no one else knows. If we attack them, all of that information gets released to their contacts throughout the galaxy." "What kind of information?" "Everything, Admiral. Fleet positions, territorial disputes, technological capabilities, resource locations, diplomatic secrets. The humans have been collecting intelligence on every major civilization in this sector for over a century. If that information were to be released publicly," Kethvar saw the implication immediately, "it would destabilize the entire region. Worse than that, Admiral, it would trigger a massive arms race as every civilization scrambled to respond to threats they didn't know existed. The resulting conflicts could destroy dozens of species." Kethvar sat in silence for several minutes, considering his options. The humans had created the perfect defensive strategy. They were too weak to defeat militarily, but attacking them would trigger consequences that no rational leader would want to face. Finally, he made his decision. "Colonel, I want you to prepare a full report on this investigation, but classify it at the highest security level. Only the High Command and senior intelligence staff will have access." "What about retaliation against the humans?" "There will be no retaliation." Vexitar looked surprised. "Admiral, think about it, Colonel. The humans identified us as a potential threat and neutralized that threat without violence, without conquest, and without causing any actual harm to the Empire. In fact, by discouraging our expansion in certain directions, they may have prevented us from encountering civilizations that really would have been dangerous. So we're just going to ignore their deception?" Kethvar smiled grimly. "We're going to learn from it. The humans have developed the most effective defensive strategy in galactic history. Instead of building bigger weapons or stronger ships, they built better lies. And those lies have kept them safe for nearly a century." He activated his communication console and opened a channel to Imperial High Command. "This is Admiral Kethvar requesting an immediate strategic planning session. I have information that will change how the Empire approaches galactic expansion." As he waited for the connection to be established, Kethvar reflected on the lessons of the past 6 months. The humans had taught him that in a galaxy full of powerful civilizations, sometimes the greatest strength was convincing everyone else that you were connected to something even stronger. It was a lesson the Zapirian Empire would do well to remember. And perhaps with some modification, it was a strategy they could adopt for themselves. After all, if the humans could convince 17 major civilizations to avoid their space through nothing but carefully crafted psychological manipulation, what could the mighty Zapirian Empire accomplish with the same tactics? The thought was both humbling and exciting. In trying to protect themselves from the Empire, the humans had inadvertently taught their potential conquerors a new way to achieve galactic dominance. Not through force of arms, but through the careful management of fear and reputation. Kethvar couldn't decide whether to admire the humans for their cleverness or pity them for their ultimate naivety. By revealing their methods to the Empire, they had given their enemies the tools to become even more dangerous. But that was a problem for another day. For now, he had a report to make to the High Command about the most remarkable deception operation in galactic history.